Okay, if you'll all please take your seats. I promise there'll be plenty of time to continue those conversations over dinner. But for right now, wrap them up. Come back to your seats. If it's something you absolutely can't stand not to talk about, run outside in the cold if it's really that important. Don't make me come down there and make you get in your seats. All right, for our last formal session this evening, this is all that stands between you and dinner, so this is going to be exciting. It is my great pleasure and deep honor to introduce Dr. Gry Hasselbalch. Dr. Hasselbalch is a Danish author and scholar specializing in the politics and power dynamics of technology, with a focus on data, AI ethics, and the historical forces shaping technological development. Her work bridges policy, academia, and public engagement, and she's widely recognized for promoting a humanistic approach to technology. Through 2 decades, she's contributed to EU and global discussions on digitalization, AI, and data. She holds a PhD in data, AI ethics, and power, and is the author of critically acclaimed books, including Human Power, 7 Traits for the Politics of the AI Machine Age, Data Ethics of Power, and Data Ethics, the New Competitive Advantage. She has advised governments and international organizations, spoken at leading global events, and moderated high-level conferences for the European Commission and others. Her expertise is regularly sought by major media, including CNN, International, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, Euronews, and Wired. And today she is speaking to us about human power, a politics for the machine age. We're very fortunate to have been able to get her to fit us into her schedule. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gry Hasselbalch.
Thank you. Can I speak in this? All right. Thank you. Thank you for this very in-depth and wonderful introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this event, which I think it seems to be, I've overheard few. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear all the presentations, but very relevant in this world that we're living in today. So, this talk is based on my latest book, Human Power, 7 Traits for the Politics of the AI Machine Age. It was published this year by CIC Press, Taylor and Francis. And so this is what I will talk about, but let me start with a little story. And this story is from during the Second World War, where a young French man comes to his professor to get advice on an ethical dilemma of his. His brother had just been killed as a soldier in a German attack, and this young man now he wants to revenge his brother by going to England and join the Free French forces. But of course he's torn because his mother, who has already lost one son, will of course undoubtedly suffer greatly if she loses her second son. And so what is he supposed to do? How should he weigh his options? Now the professor's answer to this student is, and I quote, "If values are uncertain, if they're still too abstract to determine the particular concrete case under consideration, nothing remains but to trust in our instincts." So some of you might recognize this professor. Anyone? No? This was Jean-Paul Sartre, of course, in his famous lecture, Existentialism is a Humanism, from 1945, that he later published in 1946. And so, what is it this professor is asking this young student to do? What is he asking us, humanity, to do? He's asking us to have confidence in ourselves, to set free from dogmatism, external prescription of our human destiny, religious, scientific, social, to kind of insource rather than outsource our responsibilities, our ethics. And this is, of course, what humanism is and what it's done throughout history. I would call it a freedom movement, and humanists are fundamentally freedom fighters, if we can even call that. So let's see if I can get this to change. And of course, my argument is that today we need this kind of humanist movement. We've seen this, I saw this, also this call in the last talks that I saw, again, to challenge the dogmatism of technology's reductive predictions about humanity, about humanity, about human life, about our human societies, and of course also to challenge this very reductive prediction that you usually have incorporated in these kind of talks we get from people like that. We need humanism to challenge these very, I would call them, corrosive values of what I've called the society of the destiny machine. Yes, technology, and in particular AI, has really become the contemporary manifestation of human blind faith in mysticism. Believing in dogmatism, externalizing, as I said, the ethical responsibility, we are once again, as we've done throughout history, relinquishing our ability to shape the human future by placing our faith in external forces. And by doing so, we're really limiting the human potential and freedom, which also means that we're avoiding the responsibility of determining the destiny of humanity. So that's, again, just to emphasize this, is it not time for renewed mobilization of this humanistic movement? Has it not always been the purpose of humanism to have faith in humanity, to take responsibility of humanity's destiny? So getting to my book, Human Power, it's a book about human power and the qualities of a power like that. And so this is, of course, what my talk today is about. What is it? What's it not? To try to illustrate a kind of humanistic imagination and confidence that I think can really help us frame and think about the role of AI in our lives and societies. And at the same time, what I, of course, also want to talk about is this current AI discourse that I really think is marginalizing human imagination or human power. Because essentially, this is what my book is. It's a humanist defense against a tech determinist and solutionist narrative about not just AI, but about humanity and the human potential. So let me start with an illustration to kind of show you what I mean. So all of you probably know this sound that a machine makes when it's broken, when it has a technical problem. It's a noise that signals its disruption of its efficiency, like a scoring, a buzzing, a clicking, a squeaking, undesirable sound. And this is probably also why we, for example, call random electrical signals that disrupt information-carrying signals electrical noise. So noise is something unwanted. Now take a moment and think about sounds, music, and noise in general. So if you think about noise, you probably find it unpleasant. It's the kind of sound that you don't like, but then again, noise is not necessarily always noise for everyone. Think about rock music, for example, or heavy music. It might feel like the most terrible noise to some people, while it is the most wonderful sound of music to others. So there's really this delicate balance between noise and pleasant sounds, and often it goes between what we know, what we consider right and wrong, what we consider true or false, or the unknown, the new, or what we're used to. So why am I talking about noise right now? So I use this example in my book of Noise and Music to show the social and cultural impact of digital data and AI development and adoption over the last couple of decades, not just now. So what we've done is really to treat traits of human power like a form of machine noise, like the noise a broken machine makes, a kind of noise in technical design that can and should be fixed with more neutral technology design, like, for example, the algorithm, whatever that means. And this kind of reductive attitude towards humans, or what we could also call our humanness, is expressed most profoundly in the AI hype today. We imagine, for example, our love, our likes, our potential, our desires as something we can tame in these kind of algorithmic perfect systems. Think about, for example, emotion recognition systems. So human power basically becomes an ambivalence. On the one hand, we want to empower humans and human societies with AI, but at the same time, we are also designing AI systems to quiet this type of human noise that makes us most human. The AI model needs predictability, it needs to reduce complexity, it needs patterns, and the classification system has to be complete. Otherwise, it won't function effectively. But then I'm asking, of course, when is a human being ever complete? When is a society done? Is it not always in the making? So let me show you what I mean. So here's a few examples of how humanity was imagined by some of the most powerful people in the tech debate 10 to 20 years ago, when the kind of AI we see in public use now was just about to break loose in the public domain. And what is it they're telling us about humanity? Well, if humans are just software, like Ray Kurzweil said, then of course we need an update. All software does at some point, no? Or if machines are our superiors, like Hawkins said, then it's already too late. We're powerless and we just have to give in. And if AI is just one company's or a few companies' great business adventure, like Larry Page says, then it's economy, it's a trade secret, so we shouldn't interfere with it, especially not with these laws that, hampers innovation. So I am sure you recognize all these themes in the current AI debates, right? They're still there, and these ways of describing AI are not empowering. They are really leaving us powerless, because the way we talk about AI doesn't just shape our perception about a technology like AI, it also shapes the ethical questions we ask and the political actions we take. So in my book, Human Power, what I'm trying to do is to take a different approach to artificial intelligence, but in technology in general. And so I start with what is already there, the human potential. Now, what do I mean by this, that it's already there? Well, I am basically refusing to see the human potential as something that has not been achieved yet, as this kind of mystical goal far out there in the future that we can only reach through kind of technological developments like artificial intelligence. And so what I do is to explore 7 traits of human power. And the 7 traits there could be many more, but the ones I chose are creativity, intuition, emotion, life, defiance, love, and wisdom. And my proposition is, of course, that we use these traits of human power as a sort of mission statement for the politics of the AI machine age, for the way we design and adopt technology, but AI systems in general, and how we govern them. Now the question is then, how did I do research for these traits? Because this is also kind of interesting for my approach. The approach is the key to this. Well, what I didn't do was to try to aim to make this kind of precise theory of mind. This is what Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig calls it in their seminal book on artificial intelligence, which was first published in 1995 and then revised recently in 2020. Trying to, as they say, catch our own thoughts as they go by. Basically to observe humans and their brains in action from this outside position. So I didn't try to measure the way we feel, we think, we learn, we make decisions, we love, we defy, we remember, to match them with the storage capacities of a computer or the speed of a computer. Instead, I did what I think many of you do. I examined human power from an embedded position, embedded in human history and experience, exploring the different ideas and conceptions we have developed in what we call the humanities, psychology, history, sociology, philosophy, and I've looked at art and literature and films. And based on this cross-disciplinary humanistic evidence base, because that is what I want to call it, it's clear that the dream of replacing infinitely complex human potentials with a data or machine process is not just absurd, it's also dangerous. Because the way we dream about technology really shapes what we design and how we adopt technology, and it has profound impact on humanity. Now, when I examined these 7 human traits that are also 7 chapters in my book, what I found was that they have a unique value and status in and by themselves. Unfortunately, I think that it's exactly this uniqueness that I see most challenged today, because this is also what is considered noise. It's exactly all the things that doesn't fit in, all the things we can't measure, all those things that disturb these perfect systems. This is what disturbs the systems, that's the noise. But why is it then, why can't we just accept their uniqueness and leave them alone, these traits? Well, I'll tell you why. It is because they represent a rebellion against what some has called the tyranny of the algorithm. This is an alternative, more humane method, a different perceptive power, a different approach to time and space, and importantly, a different approach to humanity and human beings. Now, we're getting to the core of it. What is human power? I can't give you the answer, but I can give you an illustration of what it can be. So, in 1989, 5th of June, the day after hundreds of mostly student protesters were killed and arrested on the Tiananmen Square in China, Beijing, a Chinese man walked in front of this row of military tanks, stood in front of them, and they actually stopped in front of him. He's later been called Tank Man. It's this fragile little person that stands in front of this display of technological power. And he seems so small and fragile, but at the same time so immensely powerful. Some of you might remember the real images. This is a generated image, but the real images of Tank Man and the videos of him. And there's so many examples of moments like this in history, full of human life, emotions, feelings, unpredictability. You know, the Tank Man was actually never identified, and no one knows what led him into this place and situation, but we can imagine that it was something very human. Emotions like love or hate and defiance, intuition, authenticity, lived experience, and memory. And so what we see here are these 2 forms of power on display, human and technological. And what Tank Man represents here is human power in all its fragility and all its force. Now, reflect on all the technological advancements we've seen in just the past couple of 100 years, not only in military tanks, but in every aspect of our lives. The world has changed dramatically. And today, Tank Man, he might not even have been, but if he was, we would certainly know his real identity. Because we have facial recognition technologies that can identify a face by matching it with a database of faces. And AI like this is deployed in smart cities all over the world. We have AI technologies developed to make predictions about people's emotions. And this, of course, means that today we could also try to detect Tankman's emotions. Maybe he would have even been stopped before walking in front of the tanks based on a system like that. So emotion recognition is also used to control crowds of people during protests or any gathering of many people like concerts or sports events. But technologies used by police forces to control crowds of humans are not the only type of social control technologies we are living with today, and they are also not the most common. Human life is represented. It's contained, it's restrained, it's shaped within all the digital devices and systems we use all the time when we interact with public services, when we look up information, when we entertain, when we do our shopping, when we go to the doctor, to school, to work. We are immersed in these digital social control systems. And what I'm suggesting here is that all these technologies of power, because that is what they are, whether it's power of police, companies, or groups of people, what all these social technical infrastructures of power, as I called them in my last book, Data Ethics of Power from 2021, that you can see here, what they're doing is to condition human power, even restraining it. Now, let me get to the key point of my new book, Human Power. What is it we want to safeguard, and how is this different from, for example, something like AI power? So take a moment and think about human power. What does it look like? It's expressed in sensations of humanity, fear of mortality, compassion, identification with other people, solidarity, emotions of love and life, defiance, anger, and feelings of injustice. These are just some of the things we can come up with. And in crucial moments in history, this type of human power has stood out. It was lived and it was articulated by individual human beings and also collective groups of people. They were key drivers of change with a very intense, unique form of power, one that suffers, one that's filled with emotion, dedication, intense reflections, unpredictable and inexplicable actions very often. Of course, human power is also this: war, climate change, the exploitation and domination of other human beings. But today I really want to insist on the other kind of human power. And what I want to talk about is what philosopher Martha C. Nussbaum calls the creation of a conscious emotional politics, a politics that's aimed at cultivating and bringing out the positive potential of human power. So let me explain what I mean by using an example from my book. So as I said, in my book I describe 7 traits of human power, but here I'll just present one of them, just to illustrate to you what I mean, and this is intuition. So intuition is something that we throughout history have always considered particularly human. In movies, we often see intuitive powers of human beings depicted as this kind of mystical energy of gifted individuals, almost like a secret human superpower. Like you will probably remember the boy from The Sixth Sense, the movie from 1999 that can see ghosts. He has this eerie intuition where he can actually communicate and see the dead. And of course, if this is intuition, then we could certainly also question intuition as the basis for making decisions in real life. For reaching real, valid conclusions and truths, we of course need evidence, we need arguments, we need analysis for that, not just this kind of mystical, anti-scientific hunch. So the question is, why not just replace intuition with an algorithm? Seems to be more valid, no? So the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, he described human intuition in exactly this way. Human intuition is not magic, it's just the human brain processing information fast, and when we do this processing information fast, too fast, and make quick judgments based on our past experiences, these will always, as he also argued, be less accurate than when we think slow, as he called it, process information slower and apply a critical logical analysis. So according to Kahneman and many others, the human mind is a type of machine. It's an instrument, as he calls it here. And so intuition is fundamentally a weakness that we have to learn to discipline. Algorithms, he and his co-authors describe as the remedy for the sheer magnitude of noise and damage that our flawed human judgment causes. And yes, words are powerful. Here, words like noise and damage are used to describe human judgment. So Kahneman, he was not alone in this kind of thinking. He is still not alone. Replacing human judgment with algorithms, many today see as a big improvement. Just think of the big hype currently around AI agents and agentic AI. Now let's try for a moment and change this perspective on human intuition. Let's think of intuition as a quality of human power, not just as a human urge that must be disciplined. So Albert Einstein, who spent all his life working with the laws of physics, believed in the power of human intuition and creative thought as the key source of scientific discovery. So he said it enabled him to think beyond the most obvious, following the clues, as he said, that are not immediately given. It enabled nonlinear thinking, leading to innovation and breakthroughs out of the ordinary. Scientific problems are like solving a mystery, he and another physicist, Leopold Infeld, argued in their very famous book, The Evolution of Physics. The challenge is to use one's intuition creatively by not falling into the trap of following only the most obvious clues. Now let's try to do what Einstein and Infeld did and consider two very different intuitive approaches to solving a mystery, both valid, achieving the same goal, solving the crime, but in two very different ways. Sherlock Holmes. You all know Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's famous detective. He solves one impossible crime mystery after another with this very logical, deductive kind of intuition. Holmes, he's analytical and rational. He observes facts and he discovers clues based on reason, empirical evidence. And what at first appears mysterious and supernatural, he always manages to dissect into a very rational explanation. You probably remember the ghost hounds of Baskerville. It has a very rational explanation, that story. Holmes is described as intuitive, but he's not an emotional man. He's not interested in the relation with other human beings or generally in the broader social and ethical dilemmas and implications of the cases he solves. He's ruthless, he's cold, he's emotionless, very much like his mortal enemy, the criminal mastermind, Professor Moriarty. So here's a different detective. I don't know how many knows him, but he's actually also quite known in some circles. This is the Italian commissario Guido Brunetti, described by the American author Donna Leon. So Commissario Brunetto, he solves the mysteries and crimes going around in Italian cities. He's guided by something very different than Sherlock Holmes. Brunetti, he's a deep, empathetic, and highly educated man. He's not really into the game of piecing together clues to solve the crime. He's actually just more interested in grasping the social and ethical implications of his cases, the reasons behind the crimes, and the feelings and experiences of the people involved. And this empathy and understanding of the people he meets, and not the least his broad knowledge of the arts and culture, often takes him beyond the most obvious. In this case, he's talking to a witness and realizing that they have something in common, and he starts a questioning based on a book he sees on a table. Now, in a detective story, the process of solving a crime is just as important as the result. Holmes and Brunetti are both excellent detectives. They both find and they trace clues and put them together to solve crimes. But their approaches, the depiction of the different steps they take when they solve crimes, the effects these approaches have in their surroundings are not the same. And of course, I want you to think of intuition in the same way, not as this race towards reaching a specific goal, but as different approaches or different ways of engaging with the world, other human beings, and our mysteries and problems. For example, which crimes are considered important by the two detectives, which are not, with which kind of human reflection and sympathy, if they have any, do they approach their tasks? How are the people in their surroundings treated? What changes do the different revelations cause in society, and why? And could we argue that to the human world, Brunetti's intuitive humanism is just as valuable, maybe even more, as Holmes' disinterested reasoning? Or what if we combined Holmes' objective analytical skills with Brunetti's emphatic analysis? So that's something I can imagine, and I think all of you can also, and all kinds of detectives like that have been imagined in films and TV series by human, like you and me, writers and producers, and enacted by human actors in the last 50 years. Think of like a pregnant detective like in Fargo, or elderly women like Miss Marple, people of different ethnicities, Jackie Chan in Police Story, Denzel Washington in The Inside Man, complex human beings and their human stories. You think AI can imagine something like that? So this is ChatGPT and DALL-E that I asked in 2023, and then again this summer, to combine and imagine and make an image of something like that. And you see that it's very hard for this AI system to create anything beyond the ready-made. Even when asked to create something new, it can't think beyond the ordinary, what it's been trained on. I can, for example, only see a very white, masculine kind of character in this picture. And so with this example of just this one trait of human power, I really want you to think of the potential of human power as an approach not contrary to a rational, logical one, just one that is different. And building on this, we could, for example, understand human intuition as something other than just human irrational feelings and prejudice. We can think of it as a different inclination, a different, more holistic way of approaching the mysteries of human life. Now, the philosopher and sociologist Gry Hasselbalch, he was really onto something important about intuition. He believed that it is fundamental to our understanding of the world and society that we make an intuitive effort to comprehend the complexities and dynamics of specific social situations, communities, and phenomena. Not just fitting them into these pre-made theories, because every little part of the world and society are intrinsically intertwined. The parts are what makes the whole picture, and every part is important. So like Brunetti, Hasselbalch was not just interested in solving that one mystery, he wanted to understand the larger social implications of a bigger picture. Now, can you see what I mean about the value of an approach like that in our society today? So technology is a little bit like superstition. We imagine the shape and the direction of our human future through technology. Actually, I think we put a little bit too much blind faith into it. Every year we see a new version of emerging technologies presented as a human superpower. We hear how these technologies will ensure our human progress, unleashing the human potential once and for all. But what kind of superpowers are we actually talking about? So there is no doubt that technology extends human powers. This is not the question here. Glasses helps the weak-sighted to see. Medicine healthy and stronger. Trains and airplanes takes us across the globe. The internet connects us. The evolution of human science and technology has expanded our opportunities and powers, but not in a frictionless way. Take the early aspirations of AI research, and many of you, I'm sure you probably know very well, artificial intelligence has always been about pushing humanity towards an ultimate artificial superpower extension. And the problem, I think, is that throughout AI history, we've been creating mechanical systems to mimic human abilities. And now with these generative chatbots, even more based on a very limited understanding of our own human potential, our intelligence, our creativity, our intuition, our human emotions. All of this has really been designed and imagined as traits that we can match and even surpass with machines. So all our aspirations were tied down from the Turing's test, which aimed to show that computers could match human intelligence, to John McCarthy coining the very term artificial intelligence. Think about that. We've done what we could to attain what we imagine human-level intelligence is, all to enhance computer problem-solving capabilities, driven by this notion that humans and machines are basically the same. And what's more, artificial intelligence was imagined to hold an even greater potential, the ability to break free from human restraints, like the human body, our biology, our politics, and society. Remember Kurzweil's idea about the human as an outdated software? Well, he also says that by 2029, AI will have human-level intelligence, and in 2045, we will implant AI in our brains, and we will achieve the ultimate singularity, where we become one with AI. And, as someone mentioned earlier, these ideas really align well with early cyber-libertarians who viewed any restrictions on technology innovation as limitations on our human power. So in the 1990s, cyber activists like John Perry Barlow envisioned this computational development that would fundamentally challenge and disrupt traditional forms of power, like governmental power, set us free. And these words of cyber liberation were really grand. They inspired the tech disruption movement of the 2000s with the motto, "Move fast and break things." I'm sure you all remember that, which basically meant break the rules made by the democratic governments of the offline world. You recognize anything in the AI discourse today? The story repeats. And so there were big dreams about liberation, but actually what happened was the opposite. Freedom from power was never really achieved. Power transformed, but it didn't decentralize. We all know that old story, the story about big tech and Silicon Valley, so I'll not get into that. Now, in recent years, I can tell you that the tech policy debate was for a moment transforming. So since 2020, OECD has, for example, tracked hundreds of AI policy initiatives from jurisdictions and organizations all over the world. And some years ago, when I started following these policy initiatives, the list of public AI policy initiatives was increasing by the day. And what was most interesting was that they had all something fundamental in common at that time. A majority of these initiatives had provisions on the ethics and human rights implications of AI. So after all these years of what we could almost call a ruthless or at least ruleless development of the big data tracking by default business model, we were finally seeing a more conscious and ethical reflection on the human impacts, at least in the policy field. In the EU in particular, which is also the region that I have had most experience with since the General Data Protection Regulatory Reform adopted in 2016, we saw the development of what's referred to in policy circles all over the world, the risk-based approach to digital technologies and AI. Of course, now also with the adoption of the AI Act last year, which included the ethical requirements we developed in the EU's high-level group between 2018 and 19. So when I wrote the final chapter, of my book. I would say that was 2 years ago. The human-centric AI approach had become the collective slogan of what is called in diplomacy circles like-minded, democratically governed countries and intergovernmental organizations like the OECD, UNESCO, the UN, so on. But at the same time, there was a contradiction. And we see it more clearly this year with renewed calls for deregulation of AI, the famous omnibus discussions that are going on in the Brussels right now, and these very aggressive AI adoption and AI first strategies, even in the European Union, the global AI race, because of course there were always forces pushing in other directions, and this year they are getting more support. And so in spite of all the good intentions, I do feel that we were also too late, because we had already allowed massive technology conglomerates to expand and evolve without accountability through decades. They're very visible in the public debate on AI these days. They tell us incredible stories about the endless potential of their AI products. I see traces of these narratives in the tech policy debate, in the public debates, even in academia I see this. Narratives about the existential threats of AI that will outperform humans and replace us, that makes us feel very powerless. About AI that benefits humanity by saving our outdated human biology and nature, that is fundamentally aimed at replacing flawed and noisy human beings. Ironically, due to these same people's lack of imagination in technology design, it is what is least human we are becoming most familiar with, the data-driven society, the predictable human being. Just think of how our human language is changing so rapidly at the moment with something like ChatGPT, polite, smooth, clean, utterly plain and uninteresting. Now, with this kind of technological solutionism, we can't avoid also becoming very disheartened about the potential of humanity, about our human power, because while listening to these stories about AI superpowers, we at the same time see the failures of the human race. We're judgmental, we're biased, we're hateful, we're destructive, and we are told that this is exactly why we need a more neutral external technological agency like an AI agent to fix all our human flaws. We have wars and we have climate change, that is true. And this is the result of a very human urge to control and to dominate not only our fellow human beings, but also nature and other species on our planet. And of course, there is absolute truth to this. Human power is fragile and easily corrupted. But I want you to remember that no technology will fix our natural human faults. We have an entire humanistic tradition that tells us this. In fact, the kind of human power that I am defending in my book and that I propose that we revisit and reposition in the politics and the design of more human-centered AI is exactly that which makes us capable of resisting destruction and violence, and to intuitively reject it. This is our wisdom, our love, our intuition, our creativity, our lives, our feeling, our defiance. Now here at the end, let's for a moment pause and take a step back and think about the human beings that has inspired us throughout history. So one example is the vitalist philosopher Henri Bergson, who has or was one of the greatest storytellers, I would say, and that is evident of the period he lived. His ideas are actually key to my book. He was active in the beginning of the last century and also during the First World War. And he was immensely popular worldwide. People would actually flock to his lectures. He was also active during a period of wild technological development, just like today. We're not in something special moment now. It's always been wild technological development, with huge impact on society. In 1903, the first powered flight took to the skies, and 10 years later, the first airplane flew across the sky. non-stop. In 1920, the first commercial radio broadcast was made. Insulin was discovered in 1921. Refrigerators was introduced in the 1920s. The first working electronic television system was demonstrated in 1927, the same year that the first commercial transatlantic telephone service was established between New York and London. I'm just mentioning a few things here. Still, technology was not Bergson's main focus. At times, it was kind of antagonist. He critiqued mechanistic and deterministic approaches to human evolution, mind, and consciousness, but it was never the protagonist. Bergson was interested in humanity, in human creative evolution, the potential of our intuition, and human morality. And what was more was that he actually inspired crucial global policymaking and coalition building. He was very involved in this, like the establishment of the predecessor of the United Nations, the League of Nations, and the writing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What kind of human collective action will the tech guru storytellers of the 21st century inspire? So they ask us to strive for human perfection. Still, we have to understand that while striving for these unattainable goals, we are losing something valuable. We're basically morphing humanity. So in Human Power, I've tried to give human power a voice in public debate dominated by discourses on technological power by introducing a more humanistic technology politics and trying to ask you to understand humanity on its own terms. Now, what I really hope is that we can use our human creative power to move forward and not only react to technology, to defend ourselves against the risks and the impacts of harmful technology and the power dynamics behind, but actually also to proactively design its trajectory, to reinforce the kind of human power I've described in the book. So please remember, there is always another way. There is time still to replace the commandment of technological power with human power. Think of technology as a musical instrument with which we can play music. And like with any musical instrument, we don't tune the musicians or the sounds it makes for the instrument. We tune the instrument to play the sounds that make the musical piece that humans can unite around. Thank you.
Excellent. We have a few minutes for questions. Any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much for your very nice talk. A question that is also a comment. You didn't touch on the huge economic power that it's actually motivating this kind of growth of the technology. And how do you think that a different kind of thinking can actually balance the huge economic power that is in place?
I think actually that is the core of the problem. So the core of the problem is, of course, that we have a few powerful tech conglomerates that are basically dictating the entire evolution of technology and the way we imagine the future of humanity. In this talk and in this book, what I wanted, because maybe my previous, I have worked in this topic, and my last book was very much focused on the power dynamics and exactly the kind of particular economic model behind. But in this talk, in this book, I really wanted to emphasize to try to take away all of those concerns and think about what is it we want to be creative and proactive around. So that's probably why you don't see it as visible in this talk as you would probably have seen it in most of my past work.
Perhaps interesting ideas might come from the past. There was an economist, Robert Solow. I understand that he was criticizing the non-growing productivity of many sectors, even if you pump digitalization there. So somehow he was seeing like an hypertrophy in money being spent there. Maybe these are arguments which can be better seen and maybe commented in the age of AI, so even more hypertrophy. So it is something that you can tell something about?
Yes, and actually we see it also now in the adoption of a large and generative AI. Now finally we're talking about the burst of the bubble, where we are actually seeing in many of the kind of sectors and the industries that have been adopting this in this kind of FOMO moment of fear of missing out, that all the benefits and all the productivity that they were promised there's not the gains that they have been promised. So, but we are just at the beginning now, where the numbers are coming out and where you are actually seeing that a lot of this is hype. No.
More questions?
Hi, thank you so much. So my question would be, how to find our way back to this intuition and to this confidence we need to trust our intuition as humans, because I can tell my students not to use ChatGPT to write their assignments, but they trust the machine more than themselves. And then I think, is it fair of me to ask them when I see some colleagues in academia doing the same? So what would it take to really scale this confidence it takes? Thank you.
It's really complex, because it's also usually in this debate when I, for example, have conversation with industry people or computer scientists, they want me to give them numbers. Why is it that intuition is better than kind of or why is it that, for example, intuition is better than an algorithmic decision-making system. They want to compare this. And for me, the idea is that it's like comparing pears with apples. No, it's two different things that should be combined. So my answer to you is usually would be that, and I kind of translate it now, instead of talking about 7 human traits, I call it human-centric priorities. And I see it as something that we could kind of translate into anything from management in companies to human-centric priorities in politics, where we're kind of building politics around, for example, how do we support creativity, something like creativity, rather than introducing and pushing some of these generative models, like, for example, in my own country, in Denmark, we love digitalization, and we jumped on the digitalization wave as the first thing. Now we're jumping on generative AI without even thinking, what is it we want to do with these generative models? And how can they support, or will they be detrimental, for example, to creativity? But it's a question of, your question is addressing how do you change culture? So I don't have an easy answer to that, no. But I think all of you here sounds like, I think that's something that people like you can do, no? No, that's your work. That's what you're doing, at least from what I saw, no? All little things from design, like how to do human-centered design, where you take account of the people that are actually using the technologies, to the narratives, it's all, that's what you are doing here, no?
One more question? Oh, she's closer to you with the mic.
Thank you for the talk. Just a question. You mentioned the tank man, no? Isn't that also stories, in the sense that human power is also made of our capability probably to take events, make stories out of them, narrations, and to, of course, this build societies. Like, what is the role of a story in that sense? Like, is that something that maybe the machine can also kind of take, that can take from us in a way, generate stories that are more compelling, and that work better? But is this something maybe a part of the power that we have to reacquire, kind of, like how the story part relates to the actual human, human presence? Like.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult question to answer, but storytelling is like the identity of humanity. I myself, I have a regional background, not many people know that, in Nordic philology and literature. And one of my favorite storytellers was Karen Blixen, Isak Dinesen, who said that you hadn't really lived your life until you could tell a story. So I'm thinking that that taking away our ability to tell our own stories is also disempowering in many ways. So I think it's a very good, I mean, you have a good issue there. I don't have the answer. That's the thing with humanism and humanistic studies and things like this. Rarely there's an answer. Maybe that's the answer, no?
So one of the most useful components of AI, if you're a decision maker or someone in a position of power, is you can use it as justification for whatever it is you already wanted to do. How does your conceptualization of power fit into that sort of technical abrogation of power, but ultimately towards the human's advantage, if you can just point to, well, the algorithm said that we needed to drop the bomb there, so no human was responsible, thus no one should feel morally bad.
It's basically, and again, it's the externalization of our powers again, no? And it's becoming more, I think Frank Pasquale is really great. It was his original book on the black box society, I think, that really pointed out how many of these systems already, back then, it's a very old book now, was kind of obfuscating the interests and the power in the systems that we were engaging with in different decision-making capabilities. I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but I think that's even a bigger question, and then we can think of cultural hegemony in terms of if you use a chatbot, for example, to generate your political speeches as a politician, what kind of interests are and what kind of cultural systems of signification are you making use of without even knowing it yourself? Did it answer or? Approaching. Okay. Well, if if you have more, please.
Well, I suppose it's the sort of contradiction of giving up power in one sense to gain power in a different way. Mm-hmm. Because you are abrogating power and I'm thinking of this in terms of like military systems, because that's probably the most morally questionable application of it. You are nominally giving up decision-making power, but in so doing, you are gaining the power of not having to worry about morality in the same way that you otherwise would, and gaining advantage in human culture by being able to claim, well, the robot did it, so no war crimes occurred. How do you think about those sorts of, and I imagine there are other cases of power where in one way you are giving up power, but in another way you are gaining different power from use of an AI system.
Yeah, well, it's called the responsibility gap. The point is now I can get into more legal arguments. Actually, most of the kind of legal frameworks that are being developed right now is placing the accountability of systems they always have to be on a human, exactly to avoid the responsibility gaps. So that is a kind of problem we're fixing. I do think that most systems, AI systems that are being implemented now in any jurisdictional context, even in the US, would have to have a human being accountable for the system's actions. But there's a lot of literature on the responsibility gaps of AI systems, and it's very interesting. But what I've seen is that the legal frameworks are kind of closing in those gaps.
All right. I think, speaking of closing in on the gaps, I think We've running up against the deadline for the dinner reservation, and I think Stefan was going to say a little bit to us about that, but if we can give our speaker another big hand.